Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of Cover One Buffalo. As always, I'm your host Aaron Quinn, and with me as always, Nate Geary. Man, how you doing tonight, Nate?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Another weekend in the off season. I am ready. I don't know. It's like every year I'm looking more towards football season without actually enjoying the summer. But I'm going to try to enjoy the summer without it. But I mean, today was kind of an interesting day. At least we have something to talk about today.
Yeah, so some news today for the Bills. Thurman Thomas getting his jersey retired, and actually fits right in with the whole topic overall of the day since we're talking about this year's running back groups. Thurman Thomas going to have his number retired this year on Monday night against the Patriots. The best running back in Bills history. So big deal. I think it's a little overdue with Jim and Bruce being up there. So glad that Thurman's getting his. What do you think, man?
Yeah, I mean, big Thurman fan. I know he's near and dear to your heart. Your first ever jersey was Thurman. For me, Thurman was always near and dear after the fact because I'm like his kid's age. I'm 26, so I wasn't really watching too much football when Thurman was in his heyday. So I certainly can appreciate Thurman the player, but afterwards, dealing with. I did his football camp when I was in high school, and just always dealing with Thurman. He was just always a great guy. So I always knew he was a Bills legend, and he was sort of even cooler guy off the field and like away from that whole stardom thing. The whole one of the best running backs of all time, not in just Buffalo history too, because I don't think he really gets enough recognition in that group of 10 or 15. Because I just think other than like Jim Brown, you go like a couple of other really great running backs, which OJ's up there too. Those
Sure.
really, really dynamic running backs that sort of transcend not only the position, but kind of how the sport was played, especially back when Thurman was playing. I mean, he was sort of the Brian Westbrook before the Brian Westbrook, and then the Shady McCoy before, so like you just sort of see how his game and sort of his style of play transcended guys from OJ to Shady. So
yeah, I think he kind of ushered in that new back. Marshall Faulk is a guy that I looked a lot at and saw a lot of Thurman Thomas. And Thurman is super special to me. Like you said, he was my first jersey that I ever owned. I didn't grow up in Buffalo, no connections to the city growing up, except for I had a few close friends in like kindergarten, first grade that were from the Rochester area. So they kind of introduced me to the Bills. But I saw Thurman play, and that's really what did it for me. So I saw Thurman play and just fell in love with his game, loved him all growing up, and became just a diehard Bills fan. I was a diehard Bills fan stuck in New England. Now I live in Buffalo. My son was born in Buffalo. We've kind of settled roots here. It's kind of crazy how sports can have that impact in people's lives, and Thurman probably doesn't even know how big of an impact that he had in somebody's life of a kid idolizing him growing up. I just remember trying to be him in all the pickup games, wearing his jersey, and didn't quite have the juke moves that he did, but I had nice soft hands.
It's funny too because he sort of coined that face mask that he had. And when we were growing up and playing football and we were, sort of obsessed with what face masks we were going to wear, like all the running backs, I was like, I want the Thurman face mask, like I want the one that's got the two bars going across and the one right down the middle of the face. He even wore that when he played for the Dolphins. And that was like kind of after those face masks were cool to wear as a running back.
Yeah. And so I love that he's still in the area, and obviously he pops on the John Murphy show from time to time. So it's great to see those guys still in the area. And I'm not probably going to make it to that game, but congratulations to everybody that already has tickets to that Monday night game, because it just got a lot cooler. That's going to be a really, really cool special thing. I'm sure they're going to have a really cool giveaway. So props to Thurman. And that kind of segues into our conversation for the day. But before we get into that, I just want to remind everybody here that if this is your first time listening to the podcast or finding us on YouTube, go ahead and like and subscribe on YouTube, find us on iTunes, all those places you listen to podcasts. But more importantly, go on your phone, whatever it is, Android, iOS, and download the app. I know you're a big proponent of the app, man. If you want to tell us how you use it and give people what they get out of the app.
The app's great. Obviously, and here's the best part about the app, of course, it's free. You don't have to pay for anything on iTunes, Apple, iTunes Store, or of course, Android as well. And the great thing about it is you get all of the great content you normally get at cover1.net at your fingertips, especially for the podcast. It's nice. I know we had a couple people talking to us on Twitter today saying that they always listen to the podcast while they're doing their workouts or while they're running, which I'll never understand. You psychos that run, I can't do it.
I can't do it.
I can't do it. I say it's my knees, but I think more or less I'm just a giant pussy. That's just kind of the way it goes, and I will cry my way through having to do any running. But if you're a psycho like that and you want to listen to us on the run, of course the app's a great way to have all that right at your fingertips. So make sure you download the Cover One app, of course, Apple Store and Android as well.
Because with the podcast, you get great content like we're about to talk about. So last week, if you didn't listen, we broke down the QB position room, kind of went along with Nate's article of why Josh Allen's going to start sooner than expected. So you can find that article at cover1.net, and you can find the podcast and go back and listen to that. That one's going to be good for a while. Usually our podcasts are a little dated during the season. These off-season ones are going to help you get through this long trudge of an off-season. So we're going to dive into the running back group a little bit here, because it's going to be a super important group in this new offense. With if like you say, Josh Allen's going to start early, they're really going to have to rely more on the running back. If it's McCarron or Peterman, obviously running back's still going to be a huge role. Shady kind of most of the season led the team in reception, so huge when he's in, when he's not. So this is a big group, and a lot of names on the list right now going into it. So let's start with the guy we all love him. I don't think there's a guy out there that doesn't love him, although there was some talk, which was ridiculous this offseason, about him being on the trade block.
But you could see it just based on who they've traded. Like,
sure, and anything can happen, right?
Right.
I'm not going there, but man, if they would, like, I'm not high on the team this year, but if they would have got rid of him, man, oh my God, it would have been. Colin Schmidt would have had a career year.
Well, right. Colin Schmidt's probably still going to have a career year as it is. But, it's interesting. Obviously, we want to start with LaShawn McCoy. You mentioned it. And first of all, I just want to point out, I saw you dusting the gloves off on Twitter with Mike Clay, talking about his projections. I like that. Dusting the gloves off, my friend.
I'm not into it, man.
One of the projections that I didn't like were the amount of receptions, not only for LaShawn McCoy, but for Chris Ivory as well. Before we jump into McCoy, I'd like to say what I really liked about Ivory in his limited time last season was that he was a much improved running back out of the backfield. He was a really nice weapon for Jacksonville out of the backfield. And when you looked at, when they had injuries throughout the season, he is sort of the perfect secondary back to what LaShawn McCoy does, right? I mean, he's sort of your thunder to his lightning. And with his improvement out of the backfield as sort of a pass catcher, and his ability to block on third down. And that's not to take away from LaShawn McCoy, because I think LaShawn McCoy doesn't get enough credit.
He actually has improved a lot.
Right, being a third down back that sits in the backfield on third down and will pick up a blitzing linebacker or will pick up a lineman, that sort of leaks through. So he doesn't get enough credit for that. But what Ivory does is really creates at least a situation where you can feel confident if you're, going to put Clay out wide and you're going to run 5 wide receivers and, you're going to only have 5 men up front. You've got Ivory or LaShawn McCoy, both very legitimate blockers. So that's sort of the nice thing you talk about when you're talking about these running backs. And as you're sort of showing up here with LaShawn McCoy, is obviously the great thing with McCoy is his ability to sort of make guys miss.
Make everyone look silly.
And what I like most about a play like this is these are the sort of plays that you need to have for a rookie quarterback. If he's going to end up playing this year, is having a rookie quarterback that you can sort of have dump off plays to a player like LaShawn McCoy and him gain, an extra 20, 25 yards on 3rd and 15 and in situations where he's sort of stretching the defense. So LaShawn McCoy obviously still has all of the makings to have a big season this year. It just is going to be honest with you. It's going to be up to the group we talk about next week, which is the offensive line, like a group that has been sort of patched together. We'll see what LaShawn McCoy can do. I mean, we saw last year at times when they were running, especially concepts that really didn't match what he did well, running out of the backfield instead of out of shotgun. When they started to run him out of the shotgun more, they saw more success. They ran that play a ton last year. The play you just saw there against the Raiders, you saw that play how many times last year? Those quick pass plays out to the boundary, and you're seeing it again here. And just let him make make guys miss in a phone booth, and that's sort of what he's famous for doing.
I'll take that matchup anytime, him one-on-one with almost anybody in the league, to gain some yardage. And the thing you mentioned it with the offensive line group, again, I don't think the offensive line was very good last year, and I'm not sure they're going to be very good again this year, but I think a guy like him makes that better, right? You saw it a number of times. You're kind of seeing it right here. There's not really anything, and he is patient enough, jukes enough to just get something out of nothing, So he even makes those.
And he still has the breakaway speed, too, that you sort of need to have at the position. But his ability to make you miss. And, of course, I think at some point you're going to start to see, LeSean McCoy, that breakaway speed, that top-end speed sort of fade away. It happens in every point in somebody's career.
Absolutely.
Honestly, for the position that he plays, to see him still as dynamic as he is at the age of 30, when you see guys who are the same age as him, guys like Clay Matthews, who are sort of like the same age as him, really fall athletically off that cliff, and you just haven't seen it with LeSean McCoy, which is, I think, maybe the most impressive part of his career, is that he's maintained this level of athleticism and quick twitch and that top end speed that guys really lose when they hit that 29, 30 age.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that I'm really interested to see, because we've been talking about it now for a couple of years, actually, since he got traded, is when is he going to hit that running back wall? And he has, every offseason they come back and they say, wow, this guy looks better than ever. We'd never seen him in this good a shape. He feels as good as he's ever felt. I was laying out the running backs and just looking at them, getting ready for this show. And obviously you think of LeSean as like the old veteran in the group, but a lot of them are right in that same age range. And LeSean is just as good as far as he hasn't lost anything that I can see. So when are we going to see it, man? Just like it's lingering there.
The drop off is like sort of hanging over his head, but at the same time, it's like this team, doesn't really have a young running back. They have a room of veteran running backs,
right?
Who and the consensus around the league is you don't pay the running back position. You draft them because you can find gems in the 5th round, and the 6th round, and 7th round undrafted. Teams have proven that, but the Bills have placed some value, and they can, while they're not really paying any quarterbacks. They're also not really paying anybody up front right now. So on the offensive line. So interesting. It's like they can afford to do it, but the running back position, historically and across the league, just isn't one that you're going to see a lot of guys ages 27, 28, and 20 up. Everybody is really sort of 28 plus, other than a couple of the practice squad guys, and Marcus Murphy, who's sort of, I guess, the young buck of the crowd. And I guess a guy that at least got some time last year and showed something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this year I feel a little bit better about McCoy being able to continue on the level that he's been playing on, because at least right now on paper, it appears that there is more depth at the position. Whether or not that shakes out throughout the summer and whatnot, we'll see. But right now it appears that there's more depth at the position, which he didn't really have last year. Right? We had Tolbert behind him. There wasn't really anybody there. Cadet for a little bit. So yeah, I think somebody taking some of these carries, some of those third downs like you talk about, it's only going to be able to extend him this season, throughout the season, not take any type of toll off a 30-year-old guy.
Yeah, and somebody mentioned it here in the chat about Marcus Murphy, how they liked 45, and I agree. I think they did too. I think he brings some size and that speed element, and he got some time. Obviously, when they needed a number 2 running back, when Tolbert, especially when Tolbert was injured, but when Tolbert just wasn't producing the way that they had at least thought he would, at least early in the season. But you could tell, Tolbert was pretty ineffective last year. When you saw Murphy come in, you're like, holy cow. That was after, obviously, Cadet goes down too. So the depth of their running back position and the depth of the running back room was tested last year. But what was nice about it is we got to see a guy like Marcus Murphy get a shot with, the first team unit and be able to play with, first team defenses and being able to run and sort of function at that speed. So you like to see that from Marcus Murphy. The rest of the room, and obviously I think Cadet's another really interesting guy that we could talk about too, because I thought when he, before the injury, was really playing really well. He was a really great player out of the backfield. And what you're noticing is, they're trying to put guys in the backfield that can add dimensions, not just as a running back, not just as a lineup in an I formation and run straight at the line,
Absolutely. And so let's get back to my buddy Clay's piece there on projections and stuff. So what are you thinking is a legitimate projection for a guy like LeSean McCoy? We're still on him. So where should we see his touches per game, receptions type of thing. I mean, is he going to have the workload he's had over the past 2 years, or are they going to pull back a little bit and try to extend him a little with the depth that they think that they have?
Well, you saw the big uptick in carries last year, right? I mean, it was like 75, 100 more carries almost. Like he added a lot more touches last year. And obviously played in more games too than the year prior. And that's really the thing with LeSean. I think his touches are going to be high as long as he's healthy. Yep. And if he's healthy, they're going to feed him the ball. He is sort of the thing. He's the machine. He's the oil. He's whatever you want to talk about that makes the engine run, makes the offensive motor run. That's LeSean McCoy. So like whether it's the screen game, which I think you're going to see more of this year in a lot of RPO situations, but just being an outlet for AJ McCarron, because I think there's a good chance he starts the season as the quarterback. And, from what Eric and I watched from him, and I think he's going to have confidence issues stretching the ball down the field with the current wide receivers on the roster. So I'd have to think guys like Jeremy Curley, guys like LeSean McCoy, they're going to have a lot of success because they're going to be sort of candidates to catch the ball at or around the line of scrimmage and get some yards after catch. And we know that's what LeSean McCoy can provide this offense. And he's right. How many touches he gets is going to be solely dependent on how healthy and how capable he is.
Yeah. And I know people are upset right now with the wide receiver position. We'll get to that in a couple weeks, but I'm less upset about it because I know people were knocking that McCoy had too many receptions last year as far as like leading the team for the majority of the year in receptions. But when you have a guy like that, if you can get him into space, like we were talking about, like we saw in the highlights,
doesn't matter how you do it.
Yeah, man. I don't care if he's a receiver, tight end. If you have a talent like that you can get into space and make a guy miss, I don't care how you get him the ball. Get him the ball and get him there. And I'd like to see more of the screens this year. I didn't think that they did that enough to get him into space with a couple linemen out in front of him because he's going to eat, man. I mean, there isn't a lot of guys, even these young, fast, athletic guys that he can't make look silly out in the open field. So bring it on. Like, give me more of that.
I think we'll see, too, a lot more stuff at the line of scrimmage in terms of the wide receivers. You mentioned screens, and I think because of what we know about the Earhart-Perkins system in terms of where guys line up and sort of the flexibility in that. And you could see LeSean McCoy maybe lining up in the slot, especially considering they don't have super great depth at the wide receiver position, especially in the slot. Obviously, if they sign Russell Shepard, I think they add a nice little slot piece to the scenario they've got going into training camp. So they've got some interesting names if they decide to bring Russell on to Shepard. So I don't know. Where McCoy fits in on all this makes a difference, because if you don't have a great slot receiver, you could see him lining up in the slot, taking slip screens, taking bubble screens, because I think that's where this offense is going to at least have to start, considering the arms that they're going to likely be working with to start the season in AJ McCarron or Nathan Peterman.
Yeah, and even if it's Allen, like we said, you're going to want to take some of the pressure off of him and hope that McCoy can do his thing. There was an interesting conversation kind of always going on Twitter about the value of running backs, but then London Fletcher was on WGR, I think it was on the John Murphy show the other day, and I caught it while I was driving.
One Bills Live,
that's what it is, yeah. Hate to call it the wrong thing, but I feel like that's what, like, calling it the Ralph. I'll always call it the John Murphy show. But Fletcher was talking about the importance of running backs, and I agree. It gets tossed around a lot about them being devalued, but I think that's just there's more talent at running back coming out of college, and you can get guys later. But especially with the Bills, I don't think you could ever devalue the running back position with the Bills right now in the quarterback state, in the offensive line state. He's the best player on the team on offense. But Fletcher continued to bring up, yes, it's a passing league, but in order to get those third down situations to third and short, you have to be able to have an effective run game. And when you at the end of the year, every year, when you look at all the teams that are in the conference championship game and in the Super Bowl, they traditionally have had good run teams. Eagles last year had a great running game. So to sit there and say that
a dynamic one.
Yes. Yeah. It's not a traditional running game all the time. But to devalue the position, I think a lot of people just see the Bills and feel like they're stuck in an old run first mentality. But I think that position is of super value in the league. How do you feel on that?
Yeah, they have some different pieces this year. They have some pieces they can work with. Like I talked about the difference that we saw in Ivory, and I think Ivory's an interesting name.
Yeah, let's jump into Ivory a little bit.
I think he's an interesting name because of his size. He's still under 30. He doesn't have a ton of miles on him in the league. And everywhere he's gone, he's sort of at least started really well. And they've sort of either moved away from him because of injury, And also he's not a sexy guy. Like, he doesn't do a lot of things that wow you on film, but he can evade tacklers. He's quick enough when he's got the ball in his hands. But the thing that I like about Ivory is right here is his ability out of the backfield. And for his size, you wouldn't really peg him as a guy that's sort of a fluid guy in the hips who can turn his body around and make himself a target for the quarterback. Like, that's not an easy catch right there for a wide receiver or a tight end, like any skill position. And as a running back and at his size, to be able to sort of extend outside of his body is really nice to see. And on plays like this is what's made him money, in the NFL, a guy that can break tackles. But listen, he can stop and start pretty well too for his size.
Yeah, the thing I like about him is that he has the experience of being a number one back in this league. You don't have that anywhere else on this roster outside of Shady. So if something did happen to Shady, I would feel okay going into a game with Ivory for a game. You know what I mean? Like spelling him for a game or two, which we didn't really have last year. If Shady went down, I didn't want Tolbert getting 15 carries. You know what I mean?
Right.
And like you said, he provides just enough of a different style of runner than Shady, but he also gives you that ability as a playmaker out of the backfield in the passing game. So it's a really unique thing to be such a different style than Shady McCoy, but still give you a receiving threat, that tough runner, red zone guy, but that can still catch the ball, has nice soft hands. So I think it's an interesting pickup. I'm not expecting a ton out of him. He's a different 30 than LaShawn McCoy is.
Very much so. But you mentioned them and what they tried to fill as that power back, that goal line back last year. It was a disaster. And Tolbert wasn't good with what they asked him to do. And so oddly, one of my big things was that they decided to try to run Tolbert out of shotgun more than they tried to run LaShawn McCoy out of shotgun. And that was really frustrating at times last year. But, this is a guy that's giving you much more athletically than you were getting from Tolbert. You're not getting maybe necessarily the special teams threat or, ability that you got with Tolbert. But I think you can sacrifice that considering the other places that they've added on special teams. But Ivory, I don't know. I think maybe people are underestimating or not maybe talking enough about Ivory, because I think he will have a factor. I think there's going to be scenarios where we talked about, and what we're talking about in the chat here is that maybe you do see LaShawn McCoy line up more in the slot and maybe having Ivory line up in shotgun or an I formation or a single back formation, So I think there's going to be scenarios where you see both those guys in the field, because I think, Ivory at times is going to warrant it, as you see from great plays like this.
Yeah, and he's not – I mean, these are highlights from when he was with the Jets. Obviously, there wasn't a ton with the Jaguars. I know Eric has some of that stuff. I'm not Eric when it comes to pulling up film, obviously. So I know he's got some of the Jag stuff, which is a little bit more recent, but he's not that far removed from huge success as the number one guy with the Jets. I mean, what was that, 2 years ago, 3 years ago now?
Yeah, 2 years ago. And part of that, the year before, it was him and Matt Forte. And obviously the injuries, that's what sort of curtailed his ability to be that number one back there. And he's not going to be asked to do that here. He's going to be asked to be the number two or number three back. And, it's going to be interesting where Cadet fits in, because compared to Ivory, Cadet's really a perfect, ideal third down back. He showed that, before the injury last year. Is he going to be the same player that he was pre-injury? I would hope so. I mean, he obviously had the leg break, but I really liked Cadet last year when he was able to come in. I liked what he brought. He brought an element of a security blanket that I really liked. They really haven't had.
Yeah, and so, I think it's interesting because they brought Ivory in really early in the process, and people were wondering then, because then I think they brought Jones back. They're adding to this room, and people see the sheer number of guys that they have at the running back position, and they're wondering why. And they're only going to probably keep 3 of these guys, and the other ones they're trying out for if Ivory goes down or McCoy goes down, and they need to bring a guy back in at some point later in the season. I mean, that's what this whole process throughout the summer is about, is get your hands on guys when you have the spots on the roster where you can have some extra leeway, get a look at these guys. When it comes to Ivory, though, like I said, I'm worried that it's hard to say, because in the same breath I just said, McCoy's not hitting that wall, and they're the same age, but I think maybe Ivory's on the wrong side of 30 to bank a lot of production on. I think He's definitely an upgrade over where they were last year. I think it's one of the few positions that they actually upgraded this offseason.
Yeah, especially the depth-wise. Depth-wise, they're much deeper. If one guy or two, if LaShawn McCoy goes down, you've got a guy that's a proven number one back.
Yeah.
Outside of that, you've got a young guy can handle some carries in Marcus Murphy, and then let's see who else sticks out in camp. And obviously we talked about the NFL being able to find these guys as undrafted free agents. Not that really the Bills brought in any, but they've got a lot of trial players. It's an interesting position, and as we talk more about the wide receiver position, about the types of players they have. Which I think maybe makes it the most interesting is how everything shakes out in camp. Does Cadet make the team because he brings a special teams element, and a guy like Kalen Clay, how does he fit in because he's a special teams guy, and where does Russell Shepard? So a lot of what happens at the running back position is going to have effect on how many guys they carry at wide receiver. Yeah, so it'll be interesting because if you remember, they were willing to keep 4 running backs last year. Not many teams are willing to do that anymore. Taiwan Jones was the 4th running back they kept.
Sure. Well, and we'll get to him here in a minute too. But so back to Ivory here before we go to the next guy. Ivory, same kind of question I gave with McCoy. Where do you see him as far as what we should expect out of him, on a per game basis, touches, receptions? Is it a pretty limited role, or are we going to see quite a bit of Chris Ivory?
I think on good days he gets 10 touches.
Yeah.
I think if the Bills are winning, I think he's touching the ball 10 times because I think that means they're running the ball, they're having success doing it, and he's getting red zone touches, and he's getting some touches out of the backfield. I would guess 5 to 7 carries and 2 to 3 targets through the year.
Okay. And now this isn't a fantasy football show, but because we finally have a guy that's a decent backup running back, would you handcuff him to McCoy? I know years ago so. Ivory was a treasure in fantasy leagues.
Yes, he was. I agree. I remember those days. I don't think so though. I just think LeSean McCoy touches the ball too much. Like if you're talking about
even as a red zone guy,
he'd have to really show that. But the problem is this offense is he going to get those touches in the red zone?
And are we going to score a lot?
Right. Are they going to be able to? Are they going to be able to get to the red zone?
Right. Interesting. So about 10 touches. So, I mean, that should put him at a nice level of production and take some of the load off of McCoy. So we're good there. So those top 2 positions, I don't think anything's going to shake out differently there. I really don't expect him to bring in any other guys that shake off of rosters. I think they're happy with those top 2.
I think, too, with Marcus Murphy I'm pretty sure they can keep Marcus Murphy on the practice squad.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think they can.
Up to date on all those.
So if let's base it off the fact that we think that Marcus Murphy is probably practice squad eligible out of all the players, all the other running backs. Right. So we would assume because they like him, they probably stow him on the practice squad. And you've got Ivory, McCoy, and I think that 3rd spot goes between either Taiwan Jones or Travaris Cadet, whoever can provide a better special teams presence. I think we think it's Taiwan Jones. We don't know because if he's not returning kicks, then Cadet can play special teams as well. He proved that last year.
So let's talk about Cadet a little bit because when he came on, there was a lot of people. The reaction on Twitter wasn't great because people just thought he was a one-trick pony because of his time with Sean Payton. Yeah. He wasn't a real running back. I saw a lot of that online, but I saw a little bit more than that from people, and I was just waiting for him to get the chance. And when he got the chances, he took full advantage of them. I couldn't find a lot of highlights, but I'll play one play here while you tell us your thoughts on Cadet and what he brought in the limited action, obviously, last year.
And if it's a Bills play, I probably know the play that you're going to end up pulling up.
It is a Bills play.
Yeah, because there's this is the play I thought of too because and the one thing that you really liked about him is his patience, but then his quick burst. And there was another play too. I think it was in this game where he had a catch out of the backfield.
There was one against the Chargers where he leveled somebody.
Oh yeah, that was a great place. But so he can play special teams. I don't know that he's as effective as Taiwan Jones was last year when he was at least not broken. I mean, both guys they went through a lot of injury at the running back position because all their running backs also played special teams. Not that Cadet got hurt on special teams,
right?
But it just goes to show you that they do really value that. So can Cadet contributes on special teams is going to be whether or not he is that 3rd running back, I think. But I really like him as that 3rd change of pace back. And I think if I'm not mistaken, he was the 3rd running back in New Orleans behind Ivory when Ivory was there too. Right before he went to New York.
He might have been actually. That's the
3rd or 4th running back that year. They had a couple of running backs that year, but
so my concern for Cadet obviously is that injury was super gruesome.
Yeah.
And it happened pretty late in the season. Is he going to be full form in training camp this year? I mean, you saw him running and some video clips this late spring. That's my only concern for a guy like that, because I think if he's healthy, I think he has a real legitimate shot at winning a spot on this roster as the third running back.
I think so too, and that's going to be the big question. Same with Taiwan Jones. Both guys had leg injuries. Taiwan Jones a little bit older. I think Taiwan Jones is right at 30.
All right.
I think Cadet's a little bit under that still. I think he's in his 26, 27, 28-ish. But yeah, it'll be, if he can come back and be an effective player, then, you know, he's got to be healthy. Just that's the position, though, is can these guys stay healthy long term? And that's why you see across the league so many guys get opportunities.
Cadet's right there with McCoy, right? He's like 29, 30.
Yep.
I mean, yeah, people think that he's younger than he is, but he's right there at that 30-year-old window. And Murphy too. Murphy's 26. You know, he's not. While he might be practice squad eligible, he's not like a 22-year-old, 23-year-old back.
Right.
And I think Jones is 32. So all these guys are right on that line at 30. Is that type of injury something you can get? I know I was out working in my yard this weekend. Got my hamstring got a little tight. I'm 34. I didn't, you know.
It's all falling apart for you.
I was working out this morning and that hamstring's still lingering, man. I'm here on Wednesday and that hamstring's still lingering. I used to bounce back a day later.
Not no more, man.
Yeah,
I'm 26 and I'm 26 and my body's been falling apart for like 3 years. So
yeah, so you know, a major injury like that, obviously, and for Cadet, if he loses speed, he really loses a lot.
He loses the best part of his game.
Yeah. So, and obviously he's a better running back than Taiwan Jones, but this is another guy that I want to get into talking about, because I do think that's a battle to watch in camp, because I picked Taiwan Jones to make the roster last year during training camp, and people are like, "You're nuts. He sucks. He's not a good running back," but he was clearly hands down one of the best special teams players throughout the preseason. And I know that Sean McDermott puts a premium on, if you're going to be on this roster, if you're not going to be LaShawn McCoy, you need to be contributing to as many plays as possible. And that means you have to get in on special teams and not just be another special teams guy, but be a contributor to get one of those 53 spots. And Taiwan Jones did it, man. I know he didn't always make the tackles, but he's a really nice gunner on special teams. Yes. He does provide some ability to return on special teams. So that versatility, and then he did show the ability when called on in the running game to once in a while make plays. I don't know that he's a guy that can do it as much as Cadet. He's kind of an enigma, man. Do they keep him as a fourth guy because of his special teams ability, as like a special teams captain? Where do you see him kind of shaking out throughout this summer?
So what he brings that Cadet doesn't is, you mentioned punt team. He can play kickoff. He can play kick return. He can play punt. He can play punt return, and that's a big thing if you're, because he can be a gunner. He can play inside, and Cadet can't play at the gunner position. He's just not big enough. He just gets worked. And you look at a guy like Taiwan, he brings sort of that length that you don't necessarily see at the position either. So you're right. Enigma is a good word for him, because you just don't know exactly where he fits in. But there's a good chance you're right. I mean, do they keep 4 running backs again? I would be surprised if they did, to be honest, but who knows? They proved that they would, so who knows that they wouldn't again, you know?
I know, and it's hard for me, because when they kept him last year, I didn't really think that here's a preseason play of my boy going down the sideline late in a nonsense game. But I didn't really think of him, even though he is technically a running back and did get a little bit of time at running back throughout the season, very limited. I didn't think of him as a running back position. Like, so they kept 4 running backs, but really they had 3 on the roster, right? Like, he is just a special teams player. It's kind of like how the Patriots keep Slater. He's not really a wide receiver, right? Like,
he's mostly just a special teams ace.
He's
the ace in the hole.
Yeah, and so if they think he's that, I definitely see them trying to find a way to keep him on the roster and maybe limit a different position, because I don't think you can rely on him in the same way you can rely on a Cadet or Murphy if Murphy slides up here. And that's a guy that I don't really have much tape on or anything. Sure. We'll have to go to Eric to get some of that. But what are your thoughts on Murphy? Can he get into this conversation this summer? I mean, we saw some sparks. Fans liked what they saw, but he doesn't have the experience that Cadet does. So can he really shake into those two and bump one of those guys out? Because not all three of those guys aren't making this team.
So if I'm being honest, I think his best opportunity would be to bump Ivory out. I mean, Ivory's expensive, and they could cut him before if he's doesn't prove to be the kind of player that they thought they were getting, or if he can't get healthy, or if he gets injured and can't get healthy. That's where I think he would, if he can prove to be better at what they need from Chris Ivory than Chris Ivory can, because he's a bigger guy. Can he be a power back? Can he also catch up the backfield? I think he could do those things. That's where he's going to get. I don't know that he's going to find a spot in front of Cadet or Taiwan Jones. I think those are going to be tough spots to take, because we said that Ivory is not really that special teamer. So can Murphy come in and say, I'm better at what you want from Chris Ivory than Chris Ivory is?
That's interesting.
For cheaper.
Yeah, and obviously Bean's going to love the cheaper aspect of that. And because of Ivory signing so early, if they cut him, that doesn't count against the
correct
picks, right? So
yeah.
So that is something to keep an eye on. I think Ivory's spot's going to be locked up. I think
so too.
Yeah, I think Murphy would
have to have a phenomenal camp. He'd have to come in and play really, really well in preseason, like really well.
Yeah, and the problem with that is the sheer numbers. Unless they're not going to run McCoy a ton this training camp,
they would have to feel really good about Murphy. He'd have to knock people's socks off.
With the amount of numbers just on paper, let's assume that they give LaShawn not a heavy workload throughout the summer. It's still going to be a tough time getting touches and being able to make your presence felt throughout camp with 5 guys as of right now in that running back room. Obviously,
crowded.
It's crowded. They just cut Green, right?
Yep, Aaron Green. And they brought in the fullbacks, which we can touch on here, I guess.
Yeah.
Before we get into some of the questions that we have in the chat room. But
well, let's talk about Ford before we jump into the fullback. So, an undrafted free agent guy, Keith Ford. I think he's competing for a practice squad spot
right
this year.
That's actually the one thing he has going for him, is he's certainly young enough and eligible to be in the practice squad. He's got.
And they're going to need a guy.
Correct. They're going to need a guy in the practice squad. Absolutely.
Right. So, have you seen anything of him? Do you know anything about him?
Where's he from?
He's from A&M.
That's what I thought. I haven't seen much of him. He's a little bit bigger, right? He's got a little beef to him.
He's not the biggest guy in the world, but watch some of these highlights, because the first thing I said when I saw him, I was helping Eric run through the undrafted free agents article that was up at Cover One of keeping things updated. The nice thing I like about him potentially is I think he's a developmental project. Obviously, if they can develop him right, I think he's got a little bit of that Carlos Williams in him, where he's just a north-south runner. He finds a lane and he just goes through it. Played at Oklahoma and then transferred over to A&M, but he's not as big as Carlos, I don't think, but he plays that way. Yeah,
he looks like a physical runner.
And this stuff reminds me of Carlos. Do you see it?
Yeah, this is the kid I thought. He's got some arms on him. He may not be the biggest. He looks like he's at least 5'10", though. He looks like he's fairly decent size. That's what I thought.
Yeah,
he's a decent sized kid and played in the SEC last year with A&M. So I mean, he's used to playing against physical defenses. Yeah, like we said, I think the best thing going for him is that he may be the only practice squad eligible running back, and they're going to need a guy on the practice squad.
Yeah, and they don't have any youth really on this roster, so I think that plays in his favor of being a youth guy. And if they keep him on the practice squad, youths, yeah. All you millennials, right? That's it. So if they keep him on the practice squad, though, I think, again, back to something I said earlier, where, they really want to get these guys in here and get their hands on them and see, hey, man, if in week 12 or whatever it is, if McCoy needs a break or he's got a funky ankle and somebody's out, can we bring this guy up from the practice squad and can he actually contribute? Or if he's not there yet, we need to find some other guys and get him in
somebody
here
that can, yeah.
So I think he's just here to get a good look. And then maybe we can tuck him into the practice squad and keep him
for a good time, not a long time.
That's right. And hopefully a long time. Hopefully they can develop some players. I mean, that's really what you expect. One of these undrafted free agent guys to stick on the roster.
eventually. That's what you hope for, is that you find a couple of gems. And heck, if that's the one position where it's most likely you're going to find a gem or unearth something instead of running back. So
yeah, absolutely. And so let's talk about fullback a little bit, because we're a team that the fans know we got him. That was one of our big signings last year, was DeMarco, and you didn't hear a lot of him last year, but he was actually a really nice piece of the offense. I think he did his job really well,
except for that Chargers game where he clearly he started the Nathan Peterman downfall, I think, by dropping that pass. I think he started the downfall. I think I'm blaming it all on him.
That's a lot of burden to bear for.
It's all going on. It's all going on DeMarco's back, and he'll take it.
So new scheme though, right? New scheme, and they've kept him this far. I think that they're going to use him to do some different stuff as far as personnel.
He's a great blocker.
And they're going to do some different personnel groupings. McDermott talked about it on the One Bills Live about, as a defensive coach, it's much harder to scheme when you have the ability to run all those different personnel groups. What do you think on that? Do you think it's a benefit to the offense to have a fullback in today's day and age?
I like DeMarco. He's good. Like I said, he's a good blocker. He's a good H-back, a guy if they're not going to have a tight end, or if you want to move Clay out. We'll see. We'll see what his roster spot looks like, because he doesn't contribute at special teams. So maybe that's why you saw them bring this guy on in the from their rookie camp, this Olstead gentleman. Yeah. Maybe that's why they brought him out. He can be a serviceable fullback and also give us something on special teams. Obviously, we know that makes him more valuable, and we know that DeMarco does not really do anything special teams wise.
Yeah, I think it would be hard for them. We talked about justifying Tywan Jones on the roster. I think it'd be very difficult for him this year to justify keeping Olstad on with two fullbacks on this roster, especially with the issues at a bunch of other positions where us fans seem to think they lack depth. It would be like maybe keeping a kickoff specialist on your roster, having
which we did
two fullbacks. So I don't know if I know they value special teams, and I know people are sick of seeing special team signings, but I think Olstad is just a guy that they want to kind of take a look at. He probably performed really well in the camp, and see what he looks like with pads on with the rest of the team. Because again, though, if he's valuable enough and they feel like, hey, this guy actually is a ball player, maybe we can move on from DeMarco in the future and store this guy in the practice squad.
Special teams, man.
Yeah, get one more year out of DeMarco and then bring this young guy in.
Special teams will horn this coaching staff right up. So if you can play a little special teams, they'll get Randy for you. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm one of those fans. So I saw it today with Shepard, right? Russell Shepard. People were talking about that today about, another guy, he's going to come play special teams. And when the Bills aren't going to make a ton of big moves right now. Obviously, next year is going to be the big year where they make a lot of more big moves when cap frees up. But since being Guy here, they've really just worked on the bottom part of this roster. And it's a lot of what we talked about with these guys.
Which they needed to do.
Yeah. Which every team should be doing constantly. Should always be those final 10 guys on your roster. 15
that's the
guys.
Big turnover is really, roster spots 30 through 45
Absolutely.
or 53, are
and so when those guys are
interchangeable.
turning over, guess what? They're going to be special teams players. Everyone in that bottom tier of the roster better contribute to special teams. So when fans see that and they see a guy and they don't really know his name, and then they say, oh, well, he's going to contribute to special teams. Don't get mad, because that is what that guy is supposed to be doing. Same with all the late round picks. Those guys better come in and immediately have contributions to special teams. If they play better than that, like if Ray McLeod or Prohl plays better than a special teams player, that's phenomenal. That means we had a great draft. But at the very least, they have to come in and contribute on that right away.
And that's what we will continue to talk about. Like, we're going to need to have special teams contributions if you're going to be on the end of that roster. That's the only way. So that it'll be interesting because DeMarco does make a lot of money. I mean, I think he's the second or third highest paid fullback in the league behind the dude out of San Francisco that I paid from Jesuit or whatever his name is.
Who the Bills were in on. He's a good player, but almost thank God they didn't get him and play that. Pay him more than he's worth.
It's pretty nice, man.
He's a nice player. He is a nice piece, but I just worry. I know McDermott says that it was very difficult to go up against teams that have the personnel packages like that. And I like DeMarco. I like what he was able to do last year, especially we talked about the other day about a weak offensive line. I think that he helps the running game when he's in there, provide another blocker. But it's tough to swallow paying a guy that's a fullback. He's not going to get in enough to pay him the money that he's making. But hey, I'm not the GM or coach. But
you're not. Luckily, I mean, otherwise we'd be really questioning what you're doing on this podcast.
That's right, giving away all the secrets. So back to LaShawn, right? Because this is a guy that he's a very special guy. I think he's the best running back. I mean, obviously Marshawn's in that conversation of what he was able to do in a short time in Buffalo, but I think he's the best running back we've had since Thurman. I don't know if I'm going out on a limb of saying LaShawn's there.
Travis Henry, Willis McGahee, come on, bro.
I love some Travis Henry, but what is LaShawn McCoy's legacy right now going into the season as a Buffalo Bill? Is there enough for him to be one of the better players in Buffalo Bills history in the short time that he's been here, or does he have to do a ton more to get there? Like, is he in the Travis Henry range? Has
yes.
he beaten?
Yeah. I'd say he's the third best running back in Buffalo Bills history.
Yeah.
Right now. I'd like to see him get to 12K here in Buffalo. I think somebody else said it in the chat. They'd like to see him get to 12K. I think I'd like to see him get to 12K here in Buffalo too.
Do you think that's doable? That's probably 2 years out, right?
Yeah, that's 2 years out. I don't know that'll happen. I don't know.
I think it's gonna be tough. I think they obviously they're gonna. I think he can get another 1K this year. I think I feel comfortable they can get around 900 to 1,000 yards.
I think he definitely is set up for 1,000 yards
rushing this year.
He's going to get enough touches if he can stay healthy. That's what it's about.
Yeah, and hopefully he's got the body of a 26-year-old versus what we think a 29-year-old, and he stays for the 2 years. So if anybody's got questions, bring them on in the chat box, because this is kind of wrapping up the running back conversation. Next week we're going to get into the offensive line. Is that what we're
O-line next week? We'll get away from the sexy positions and we'll go into the nasty. And,
I'm a little bit disappointed. I'm gonna be on vacation, so I'm gonna miss the offensive line one, and it kind of ties into both these conversations that we previously had, right? Running backs and quarterback; those two things don't function, or their function is dependent on the offensive line. So that's a conversation that I might have to tune in. Obviously, I can't be there live, but I might have to tune in on my phone and watch what you guys have to say live, because it's a very intriguing position to me, and I think it's getting downplayed a little bit more than it should be online. I think people are frustrated, and I don't know that they should be any more frustrated than we were a year ago.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot. The offense is just it's sort of a revolving door right now with where we are at top talent wise.
Yeah,
depth, a lot of depth guys. There's no doubt about it. Do they have enough guys that are starting caliber and better? I'm not sure. I don't know if they have that across the line or at wide receiver.
So do you think, now we talked about this running back group, and we've already talked about the quarterback group, and we know what we're going to be talking about a little bit. Obviously, running back is the strength of this offense this year. Back to my guys, Clay's ratings. Is this group good enough to keep us out of the bottom 3 on offense, or are they're the best position on a really terrible offense?
That's going to be the question. It's like, how are we going to exactly listen, this is going to be a team that's built around the defense, and can they turn the ball over, and can the offense just not turn it over? Can they just stay in games? And I mean, Tyrod did that. That's right. What he was good at, but can they sustain that? That was the thing that lost them games last year. So they need something from the offense, especially the passing game this year. And I don't know if they can do it. We'll see.
Yeah. And honestly, one thing I want some fans to do as an exercise this offseason when it's boring, LaShawn McCoy would have had a much better year last year. If you go back and watch some of those games, I can remember maybe 5 or 6 times where he broke off about 25 to 30-yard runs that were called back. If the offensive line can just play clean football, I know McDermott got ripped a little bit for talking about that last summer, of saying, we just want guys to play penalty-free, clean football, but it really does hurt. If you go back and watch some of the games last year, McCoy was ripping off long runs, a few touchdowns, a lot of them got called back. He would have had more 100-yard games. So if they can do that and just keep clean, because he doesn't need lanes all the time, right? He's going to create plays with or without. So just don't get penalties because he's gonna
just don't get in the way.
Don't get in the way and don't make some stupid mistake trying to do something. He doesn't need you there. So like don't hold on to the guy. He's gonna make the guy miss anyway. So if he can have a clean year, I think we can expect big things. And if as he goes, so goes the offense. And I think Clay is wrong a little bit in that I think the running back position group is so good for this team and it's so top heavy with McCoy. I think he's still a top 10. I think he's like 6th, 7th best running back in the league. And if he's that and the offense runs through him, then I think they're better than the whatever he had us at 32nd, 28th overall offense.
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
Mark it down. Write this moment down that I said this, and let's talk in the winter.
Let's talk in the winter.
All right. Well, so did you see any questions? Do we have any questions coming up?
Well, yeah, we got to give a shout out to Natasha Hunt. She's in the chat. Get well soon, Natasha. Thanks for watching and listening to us as always. Let's go back to, let me look through way more from Chell Wilson here. It looks like way more multiple wide receiver packages in the screen game. Murphy, Cadet, and Shady will be, I think that's right. And I just don't know that they're going to really be, they have like what, that was the one guy I really was advocating for is the type of player. They don't have like a sort of hybrid guy that like Tavon Austin, like they just got in Dallas. A guy that plays like running back / receiver / they don't have a slash player. Like that's not Cadet. That's not, certainly
Cadet
not
might be
Ivory.
able to do some of that though.
Yeah, but you just want a guy that has that like sort of top end speed, the ability to take those not necessarily end arounds, but jet sweeps and stuff like that. And yeah, I don't know. They don't have that player right now.
Sure. Yeah. We do have, what is this? What is your over under for the running back, fullback roster spots and who are your favorites? So that's kind of like a overall of what we just talked about. Where are you at? If you had to put the roster together,
5 is the tops. 5 is the tops.
And that's including running back, fullback.
Yep, 5's the tops. That's high.
And give me your 5 then. Who's making this team?
LaShawn, Ivory, Cadet, Jones, DeMarco.
I'm probably the same.
That's what unless something before camp changes.
Yeah, if Murphy really balls out, but I think the versatility of Jones keeps him on this team. Absolutely. So I don't think we have any more questions coming through. I think everyone's just chatting.
But we got Adolf Hitler in the chat. That's
a good time to leave.
I didn't know he had access to the internet. Good for him.
That's right. Well, you got to watch Hunting Hitler then on
Netflix.
Yeah. So anyway, what do you got going on this week, man, for content? What are you doing? And let people know where they can find you.
So next week is when I'll be doing some bi-weekly opinion pieces up at Cover One. Nothing this week. I am going to be back on Sports Talk Saturday this week. I've actually got Rich Bartell, which if you don't follow him on Twitter, please do. He's a former NFL quarterback, sort of journeyman quarterback, never really started many games, but he does a lot of great stuff on Twitter in terms of tutoring the quarterback position. I want to get a lot of his thoughts on obviously Josh Allen, but sort of the makeup of what you have to be, and it's sort of how he talks on Twitter. If you, like I said, if you don't follow him, do it. He's very, very insightful. So I'm going to have him on Saturday. I'm really excited about that. So we'll have him Saturday, and I'll probably have some more other guys as well. So Saturday, and then next week Wednesday I'll have Thursday. Next week Thursday I'll have my next column.
And where can we find you?
At Nate Geary WGR. You should definitely follow me on Twitter if you don't. And let me get Chappie 5445. Rich's or I think it's Rick. Hold on, I'll get her the.
Yeah, if you don't follow Nate, he's probably one of the most willing to participate in any conversation on Twitter of any of the guys that I know. So if you're not following him, follow him. If you want to troll him, he's probably the most accepting person to trolls.
I will troll right back. Okay, so it's Rich Bartell, and he's at Coach COACH Rich Bartell. It's BARTEL. He's got a picture of him as playing for Arizona. He was a Cardinals quarterback and a journeyman at that. But some of his videos are like inspiring. Like he's just a very, very good speaker. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about when you go and follow him. So I'll have him on with me Saturday, Sports Talk Saturday, I think noon Eastern. So check it out then.
Awesome. And I don't have any content coming out. I kind of stopped writing over at Cover One, where I'm doing this podcast every week. I'm going to miss the podcast next week. I'll be down south.
Ooh, time out, Aaron. We just Bills fan 7883 brought up McLeod, and I think that's an interesting guy to talk about maybe as a running back. Okay, so I mentioned that not having that dynamic athlete. Ray McLeod could be if he turns out to be. So that was a good add-in at the end there, Bills fan 7883.
Yeah, I didn't think of that either when I was coming up with running backs. I'm not very high on Ray McLeod right now. I think he's going to have to do a lot to catch on. I know that they obviously spent the pick on him, but he might end up being a practice squad guy even as a late pick. So I'm excited, though, to see what he offers, because I know there were some wide receivers on the board, one from a school that goes behind you that fans really wanted. And they went with Ray McLeod. So they must have seen something in him in the very limited action he got. But yeah, maybe Dable saw that and said, hey, this could be the guy that can give us.
Oh my God, it's Rob Quinn.
Quinn's here. Oh no. All right. That's good. It's a good time to leave before things get too crazy here. So somebody blocked that clown. All right. So if you don't haven't listened to this podcast before, this is the first time listening to it, and you're not following us over here on YouTube, so when we go live, we tend to go live on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern time. You can come over to the YouTube page, go to the Cover One YouTube, subscribe to it, because there's a ton of great content that comes out on it, and hit the notifications button. You'll get notified when we go live, or whenever Eric uploads a new video. He's always uploading some great stuff. Like Nate alluded to earlier, they did the AJ McCarron film breakdown. That was an awesome one. They're always doing new stuff like that. So. And don't forget to check out, Eric just did, I think it's available to everybody right now. I don't think it's just premium members, but the balancing of Josh Allen, talking about the mechanics and what needs to change and how you change it and all those things. And it's a great breakdown. And then he's also got another one out about the terminology of the EP system. So this offseason is the time to learn. We've got a bunch of changes coming up for the Bills. If you're a fan that wants to get ready for the offseason, now's the time to learn. So jump into cover1.net, go download the app, Android, iOS, and jump in and start learning, man. I share the articles with all my friends, and they always tell me, like, dude, I've learned so much from following this Cover One group and this guy. So it's helping us all kind of gain the knowledge that, for me as a casual fan, I didn't have before. Put that shirt down, man. Get
with the background too. It's very, very good.
Oh, goodness gracious. So anyway, you can follow me at Aaron Quinn 716. Nate and I are going back and forth talking about Bills. Follow all the Cover One social media, get on the podcast, follow us, give us a like, subscribe. If you like the podcast, take a second to give us a review. It helps a ton, helps bump us up for other Bills fans to see it, and share the content. And look forward next week. Big conversation about the offensive line. I'm going to miss it.
That's right.
Maybe I'll be in the chat box with Rob Quinn. I don't know. We'll see.
#share. Let's go.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks again, and we'll catch you next time.